Welcome into the first Climate Friday newsletter of the new year. Good to have you with us here, meteorologist John Burchfield. Now that the data is in for the month of December, we can recap what is officially the warmest December on record here in the Toledo area, as well as much of southeastern Michigan and northwest Ohio. If you're not already subscribed to the Climate Friday newsletter, you can do that at WTOL.com/email and watch the very latest online on WTOL 11 Plus and on YouTube. So we're going to be breaking down the data on the warmest December that we have ever logged in the Toledo area, talk about some of the numbers, and also where do we go from here. We haven't had much of a winter yet, but as we look towards January, what can you expect? Let's get into the graphics and break down the numbers in this week's edition of the Climate Friday newsletter. So when all the data came in, December 2023 officially went down as the warmest ever recorded, and we have weather records dating back about 150 years to the late 19th century. Our average temperature over the course of December was almost 42 degrees. And that factors in both the daytime highs and the overnight lows. That puts us at close to 9 degrees above average for what you'd expect during the month of December. Now, if you just look at the daytime highs, we average 48 degrees. Imagine that, almost 50 degrees, our average high temperature during the month of December. Normal is 39 degrees, so that number also was significantly above the December average. We ranked number 1, topping the list as warmest Decembers on record, and this is looking at that mean temperature, in other words, the high plus the low, which encompasses the entire 24-hour day. Number 2 was the late 19th century, 1889. Of course, the weather data and the thermometers back then, perhaps not quite as accurate as they are now, but still gives you an idea of just how warm that December was. 2015 takes the spot as number 3, and 1877, another very warm 19th century December. So how did the numbers stack up? Well, we averaged a mean temperature close to 42 this year, 41 in 1889, and we've had several other Decembers that added up to be 40 degrees or warmer. Now, if you rank the Decembers in terms of high temperature, which is a little bit less common, this year ranked as number 3, 2023. Topping the list is 1889, followed by 2015, and shortly behind is another recent year, 2021. So how do those numbers stack up? Well, far and away the warmest was 1889 with an average high temperature awfully close to the 50-degree mark. 47.7 was the average high temperature during December 23, still exceptionally mild. Now, one of the most unusual phenomena that occurred over December was the lack of sub-freezing temperatures. We only had 10 days where the overnight low dipped down below freezing. Now, typically, sub-freezing temperatures is something that is commonplace this time of year. That only happened 10 times during the month of December. The warmest day over the course of the month was 65. That was a record set back on December 9th. The coldest day during the month of December was only 23 degrees. Now, that did happen twice on both the 13th and the 14th. We did have some chillier overnight lows during the middle of the month, but it goes to show just how rare those freezing temperatures were during the month of December. Now, what's even more noteworthy is our high temperature never once during December went below 32 degrees. In other words, every single day featured a high temperature that was above freezing. The only time we dropped below freezing was at nighttime. Normally during the month of December, that happens 9 to 10 times where our high is below 32. Not a single time, 0 December 23. So it goes to show just how much milder it was than usual and how few chilly days were on the calendar. Looking at the month as a whole, a number of days exceeded the 50-degree mark with that noteworthy day, the record on December 9th. That was the warmest day during the month at 65 degrees. Christmas and the day after, you may remember that, a very nice and mild, almost spring-feeling holiday. 59 degrees happened twice. We logged a 58, a 57, and a 54. And this is just the list of the warmest December days. There were also quite a few other mild days that are noteworthy. Now, we only had 10 nights dipping down below 32. I talked about the rarity of that and how not a single day dropped below the 32. Normally, we have 24 nights that are below freezing. So 24 versus 10, fewer than 50% of what you normally expect. And sub-freezing temperatures is something that's pretty normal in December, but we lacked this past year. And now in terms of snowfall, that was also something that was absent in our December weather, just a trace of total accumulation, and that has only happened 4 times in recorded Toledo history. It happened first in 1931, again in 2014, 2015, and this past year. So we did have a few flakes flying, but when you see that trace number, that means that it was not measurable. Now, climate change could potentially be related if you look at the correlation of the more recent recent years. Of course, these all happened in the past decade, and those are Decembers without any measurable snowfall. Here's a list of the least snowy Decembers on record. The first three, all very recent years in recent memory. 1931, also a trace, and falling short behind at number 5, yet another recent December, 2018, with only a 1/10 of an inch of December snowfall. So one thing that is becoming apparent is that, well, December doesn't seem to be producing quite as much snow as it used to, especially when you look at the fact that 4 of the 5 on those lists, with just a trace to a 1/10 of an inch of snowfall, all happened in very recent years. This has been an exceptionally slow start to the winter, less than 1 inch of accumulation, and even though we do have a bit of snow in that WTOL 11 weather forecast, it is not going to be much in terms of making a dent in this snowfall deficit. Only once in history have we had less than we currently do, with just 1/2 an inch during the winter of 1918 through 1919, and these numbers are looking at winter snowfall through early January. 1965 to 66, just 1 inch, 39 to 40, a little over an inch, and 1.5 inches, 1997 to 1998. Normally at this point in the winter, we'd have close to 10 inches of snowfall, and there was one year, you may remember that one, a notable year, 77 to 78, where we had almost 3 feet of snowfall at this point during the winter season. So that's a look at our local December. How did we fare nationwide and across the world? Well, December was very warm across the United States, and we're even going to look at some international numbers as well. Across the entire country, there were over 3,800 December records that were set this month. Those are those daily high temperature records, and we had one here in Toledo. Now, of course, there's lots of cities that are taking weather data and have thermometers, but that's still a pretty big number of record highs this month. In the state of Ohio, there were 21 records that were shattered during December of 23, and Toledo did contribute one to that. That occurred on December 9th, where we had a record high of 65 degrees, and there were another 20 in other cities in the Buckeye State. Now, I do want to show you one more piece of data on some of those records, not just in the United States, but we can even look at some records that occurred in Canada, where warm air also moved on through. There were 447 high temperature records in the country of Canada, and that was only in the month of December alone. So it goes to show that this warmth and this anomalous mild conditions not only affected us in Ohio and Michigan, but also across much of North America, seeing warmer than normal conditions through the duration of December. As a whole, December is warming and winter is warming as well. Our average temperature, looking back at the last 50 years, is certainly something that is on the rise, and some data sets do show that we're about 6 degrees warmer as a whole in the last 5 decades or so. Back in the winter time in the 70s, we used to average below 25 degrees, and there has been a significant uptick in that. Of course, there is some year-to-year variation, and there's a lot of factors at play there. For instance, El Nino versus La Nina, and even the individual weather patterns that we have due to the jet stream do play a role in that. But we have seen 6+ degree warming in the last half century, and we often talk about how just in the last decade we have seen 3 degrees of warming in the month of December, and that's been especially notable when you broaden the data back looking to 1970. So yes, there will still be cold winters, there will still be snowy winters as well, but the overall trend is undeniable. Even though there are some cold ones below that line, the overall trajectory is moving up. Winter warming is something that is especially prevalent here in the Midwest, but is impacting a number of states as well. The darker the red color on this map, the more that has warmed in terms of temperatures. If you look at the eastern United States, from New England and the mid-Atlantic back towards the Great Lakes, a lot of those states have experienced 4 to 6 degree warming during the winter time. Even out west, there has been some warming, the Pacific Northwest, out towards California and Nevada, but believe it or not, the warming out there has been less pronounced, and this is just during the winter season. Now, what's interesting is during the summer, those parts out west have actually experienced more warming. However, across the Great Lakes region, winter is the time of year that has been affected by climate change the most, and of all 12 months of the calendar year, December, that is the month that has warmed up the most, at least in the Toledo metro. Now, when all is said and done locally, this will go down as the second hottest year on record, second only behind 2021, which was, of course, another very recent year. Our average temperature this calendar year was over 54 degrees. And if you look at the data, it is an awfully close battle between number 1 And number 2, you'll notice both of those years, 2023 and 2021, well, we both had a 54-degree high temperature. You have to go down to the decimal place to determine who's number 1, who's number 2. Most of the recent years have all been milder than average and also ranked fairly high atop that list. 2022, that was the number 8 warmest on record. If you look back at the pandemic year, that was the 5th warmest on record. And a year further back, 2019, that was also number 14 on record. So all certainly very high ranking. And this year, the 2nd warmest in Toledo recorded history. And keep in mind, we have 150 years of weather data to go back on. Overall, an exceptionally mild year. And as we round the corner into 2024, it does look like winter is really going to start to take a hold, and we'll feel some cooler than normal temperatures and perhaps a more active weather pattern as well. If you're not already subscribed, WTOL.com/email, the place to find it. And you can follow along on social media. We'll see you each and every Friday for the latest Climate Friday newsletter.